So in this part, what we're going to look at is how to tell our stories with power and presence. So why do we want to be able to tell our stories with power and presence? Really, this is the way to connect with our audience so that they can follow how we got to our message, how we got to the insights and the life lessons in a way that really engages them. They often say that people don't buy a car because of the rationale, the logical argument. People buy a car or anything else with their heart. And it's the same way if we want to influence or persuade our audience in any way, we need to tell it in a way that engages their heart, the animal inside them that responds, the animal inside us. So we tell a story in a way that engages and shares our own experience. So what I'm going to do is talk about the 4 points, I've added a bonus point, of how to tell our story with power and presence. And then you'll be able to, at the end of this, take that story and immediately share it with other people in the most impactful way. Now, the first thing about how to tell our story is, you've probably heard this before, don't tell it, show. Show, not tell. So even before we get into these 4 points, please bear in mind that everything I'm saying here is a show. Now let me show you what I mean. The first part of our story that we tell is the before, the defining moment. We talk about who was I before such and something happened. Let's say, for example, your story is about a car crash that you were involved in. Now, instead of saying, there was a time when I got into a car crash, but then after that, I learned a great lesson. Don't just talk about the car crash. Be the eyes of the person experiencing it. So say, I was driving along Route 1 and I looked through the window and the sun was shining and glancing off my face, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw a huge truck just bearing down on me, and it sideswiped, and suddenly I felt smash on the side of my body. That is the before. The before is what you saw with your eyes, what you felt, what thoughts were maybe going through your head. Be present in that moment before and be the person so that your audience can be invited in to see through your eyes what you were smelling, what you were seeing, what you were sensing, what you were feeling, and bring it to life in that moment. Don't just talk about it. Be there in the before. And also you might say who you were before, what mattered to you, what your beliefs were. You know, it could be in that moment when I was driving the car, I was just thinking about how I was going to move house, and I was going to go and move to the other side of the country, and how I was going to start a new, fresh life. A little thought like that could be quite interesting later on when your life really does change. So, you know, illustrate who you are. That's the before. So the second step now is the defining moment. Defining moment. This defining moment is that pivotal moment where you go, and then everything changed. Or suddenly, there I was going along in my life as a free and wonderful child, having a great lifestyle. This is my own story. I loved life. I lived in Hong Kong. I constantly went leaping off boats into the water with my friends and my brother, and we had so much fun. And then suddenly everything changed. My mother left home. My parents got divorced. My trunk was packed, and I was sent to a cold, grey English boarding school. Think Hogwarts without the magic and without the broomsticks. It was like a prison sentence. Our life was run by the bell. That was my defining moment. That was where I went from being free and loving life and leaping, taking leaps of faith and feeling that I was my true and wonderful self, to being constrained, being confined, having my soul crushed. That was a defining moment for me. Something happened where everything changed. So what was yours? In your story, who were you before? And what was the thing that changed everything? What was that moment? Now, sometimes it isn't an instantaneous moment. It can be over a bit of a period of time. In my case, it was a bit of a period of time. Things started to shift and change. The defining moment in the story I told earlier on was when I went to have a scan with my baby and we discovered that everything, the baby had died. That moment was the moment that changed everything. Everything that I thought up until that point, which was that I was very hopeful and I was expecting and I loved life and I was at the top of my game, went in that defining moment to nothingness, to loss, to no longer having faith in life. So work out for you, what was the pivotal change and how did your beliefs change from beliefs before to beliefs in that defining moment? Okay? Then the third point is after. Who did you then become as you found your way out of that challenge and out of that struggle? How did you cope? And what were the things that began to teach you your lesson? What did you begin to understand differently about the world? So after, what did you understand differently? What did you understand differently as a result of everything changing? Now let's take my childhood story. There I was before, a free and playful child who loved the world and just enjoyed the moment all the time. Life was an adventure. It was full of excitement and I was so engaged and I loved it. Then, defining moment, everything changed. Cold, grey, English boarding school, constrainment, confinement. My soul felt crushed. And then the after. I was free again, and that's when I resolved that I wanted to find a way to live my life again and have that sense of freedom as my true and wonderful self. Whoever you are, whatever you do, whatever your background is, we all have to find a way to make the right decisions for ourselves in our lives. We all have choices to make. And those choices are all around who we really want to be in the world, what we want to become, what our purpose is. And it was in that time afterwards that I resolved that that was what I wanted to do and to be. I didn't realize it consciously at the time, but that was my after. That's what I begun to understand differently as a result of being so constrained by my very strict old-fashioned boarding school. So I actually have them to thank for it. Now, finally, point 4, the really important thing here is this is the redemption. Oops. That becomes a dream. Now, let me explain what this means. You understand, in point 3, you understand something differently about the world. Now people want to know how that has affected and changed and transformed your life. How that lesson got applied back to your world. I learnt as a child, or as an emerging young adult, from my strict school, I learnt that I wanted to be true to myself. I learnt that I didn't want ever to feel that constrainment and that confinement again. So in point 4, we need to show and share with the people we're telling our story to how that affects us now. And how I could say is, and now I am committed to doing that every day. Every day I have to ask myself, is this in line with my truth? And does it have that childish excitement and that fun to it? Am I enjoying myself? Am I living my life to the full? And that's how I apply it to my life today. That's how my story has affected me today. So find the redemption in your story and explain how it applies to your life today. How it means that you are living your dream. And that is how to show or to share your story with the world. And just to recap, share your before through your own eyes. Get your defining moment when suddenly everything changes, or over a period of time I began to realize. It can be a sudden or a period of time. Point 3, who were you afterwards and what did you understand about the world differently? And number 4, the redemption, how it was actually a gift. How it applies to your life today. How you have been redeemed in some way. How your life is better as a result of going through that challenge and that struggle and that story. Now, when you tell your story in this way, your story will be brought to life in a way that connects with your audience, because they can be there, experiencing your story as if they were there. They can go through the emotional highs and the lows, and they can get why it matters so much. And they can be inspired by how you're now applying it to your own life in the way that's right for you. So that is how to tell your story, or how to share your story with power and presence.